Hello, Facebook friends. We are here at the Doc Bookstore tonight, and I'm here to introduce our next sheriff for Tarrant County, Mr. Right. Patrick Moses. Yay!
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much to our outstanding House District Coordinator, Melinda Hamilton. I would tell you, she is by far one of the most prolific individuals in all of Tarrant County, concerned about simply doing the right thing. Yeah. So I'm excited about what she's doing and how she is doing the work that she's doing, all for the cause of justice. Yeah. I am Patrick Moses, and before I go down any of my normal rabbit holes, let me just pause for a moment and tell you who tells me what to do. There is a person in the room tonight that it's really my sunshine. Is that all right to say? Yeah. In this kind of setting. Yeah. Say hello to my bride, Rhonda Moses. And just behind Rhonda is our old fellow, Terrence. Our son, Terrence, is with us on tonight, too, so we're excited about him being here. And have two other individuals who are with us in this journey to ensure that we do the right thing in all of Tarrant County. One is Preston Smith. You got the camera with him. And Preston, a recent graduate of the University of North Texas, a graduate also of Elverman High School, is taking on this role of mobilizing the young people just to vote. But then we have with us as well, brother Joshua, help me with the last name. Lazana. Yeah. Joshua just joined the team. He's a graduate of Boswell, part of the Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD, and a student now at UTA, of all places, UTA. Yeah. And he's studying a course called political campaigning. And his smart professor and is encouraging the students not just to learn about campaigning inside the classroom theoretical, but really put some meat on the bone. Yeah. Get involved from a practical perspective in a race. And so Joshua is our intern and really is the one who's keeping me on the straight and narrow. So thank you, Joshua, for what you're doing. I am wild excited about what I'm doing. I must tell you, I am somewhat problematic. I'm problematic simply because of a question posed by W.E.B. Du Bois at the beginning of the 20th century. In his book, The Souls of Black Folk, W.B. Du Bois poses a historical and I ought to say a contemporary question. And that question is, how does it feel to be a problem? How does it feel to be a problem? People in Tarrant County witness today an event that was trying itself to bring us all the way back to the Jim Crow era, where people who look like me could not vote. When my mother gave birth to me, my mother could not vote. My mother, at the age of 34, could not vote because of Jim Crow discrimination. That's a problem, isn't it? But yet in 21st century. Today is what? September, somebody help with the date.
12.
September 12th, yesterday, September 11th, right? God bless those who lost their lives. September 12th, 2024. And we still wrestling with this notion of voter suppression. We're still wrestling with that.
Yeah.
The problem with voter suppression, the problem with voter suppression, I argue that it is indeed the cog in the middle of the wheel of oppression. That's what voter suppression does. But voter suppression creates, because of propaganda, creates apathy among young people. And I will tell you also, apathy among folk in my age group. My granddaughter, hey Tatum, says that I'm old anyway. So apathy among us too.
Yeah.
Because of voter suppression, we have neoliberal policies and practices, housing and wealth deprivation, gender subordination, that's women not having the right for what they had for the last 50 years to determine what to do with their own body.
Yeah.
Public education, elimination and really poor funding of schools, book banning, victim blaming, underemployment, school to prison pipeline, and I also tell you the 67 people who have died in the Tarrant County Jail. That's a result of voter suppression. It is a direct relationship, a cause and effect, because we're blocking people from having access to the ballot box. As a result, when we look at who voted in the previous elections, including the presidential 2022 election, and we look at that President Joe Biden actually carried Tarrant County, and yet our 2020 nominee, Vance Keys, did not get the same number of votes. We have a problem in Tarrant County. We have a problem when individuals, because of their political ideology, is bringing that into the space called the office of the sheriff. Let me say this to you. The role of a sheriff is indeed a constitutional office. It's a constitutional office in the state of Texas. The sheriff in all 254 counties. Now, I'm going to focus primarily on the urban ones and not on the smaller ones. The sheriff has three primary duties. One is managing the county jail. The second is courthouse security. And the third responsibility, the third job of a sheriff is provide law enforcement for the unincorporated areas. My question from a performance perspective, a sheriff has no responsibility, zero responsibility of serving as an activist. And that's what we have in Tarrant County right now. The current sheriff is a left-wing activist for all of the propaganda coming straight out of the mouth of Donald Trump. Call a spade what a spade is. I never forget, as we prepared for January 6th, I was still working for the Department of Homeland Security on January 6th. I was still on my post on January 6th. But prior to January 6th, all of us in law enforcement received intelligence for us to ensure that the elector, those who were serving as electors, to make sure that your vote count and go and actually certify that President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris were certified and then can take office on January 20th. And so as I sat in my office where I served as an executive, the assistant director for field operation with the responsibility for 23 states across the United States and having all of the law enforcement, criminal investigation, and intelligence capability. And we were making those preparations. Donald Trump on January 6th was doing what? Inciting a riot, an insurrection in our nation's capital. And what bothered me on January 6th, I remembered when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis and called for his mom and said he could not breathe. And how we wanted to use the force of law enforcement to really traumatize Black and brown people for simply saying no justice, no peace. That was a watershed. That was a turning point for me. I knew that I had to find an exit to lead the work that I had been doing. And let me tell you, I retired in May 2021, ultimately, after 31 years, again, titled Assistant Director of Field Operation, responsible for all of those programs. And got back to finishing up my doctorate, my doctor of ministry, and many folk ask, where have you been since the primary? Well, I had a clock. I didn't want my wife, Rhonda, to put me out, and that clock was 7-year, and it was closing in on me. And I had to finish doing all my work. And one day I was at the house. I just finished with the Doctor of Ministry Committee to actually approve my work on how to get us from our community re-engaged in this process called voting. How do we stop all the violence? How do we stop people from dying in our jails? And so I was wrestling with this piece called voting. And as I was typing, I got a text message from our 2020 nominee, Vance Keys. And Vance called, he said, Reverend Moses, I really don't care what you call me. He said, Reverend Moses, there are a number of us who are concerned with what's going on in the Tarrant County Jail. And I said to him, you're talking to someone who is equally concerned with what's going on in the Tarrant County Jail. And I will tell you, in 2020, I had not heard, and I'm being honest with you, I'm a pastor of a church in Fort Worth. I had not heard that there were people dying in our jails. It must have been one of the best kept secrets in all of Tarrant County, indeed the state of Texas. But my wife and I were sitting in the backyard one evening, and I picked up the newspaper. And in the newspaper, I heard of a name of a person named Robert Miller. And I like, what in the world has happened to a person who is experiencing a mental health crisis? Why are we living in a world where if I'm having a mental health issue and a police officer approach me, should not a police officer know where to take me? I mean, come on, can y'all help me? Yep. Please help me with that, because I am at loss. Why would a police officer approach me and at best, it's a Class C misdemeanor, criminal trespass? Robert Miller had no business, absolutely zero business, ever being placed in the back of a police unit and carried over to the Tarrant County Jail. No business whatsoever. None whatsoever. So Vance Keys called. I had been reading and trying to get smart on what in the world is going on in Tarrant County. So much so that for a couple of weeks in our Bible study, we wrestled with the issue of the people dying in Tarrant County Jail. What in the world is wrong? Why is there no accountability? Why are we not speaking truth to power, and our elected officials not properly addressing those issues? I tell you what my conclusion is. My conclusion is because our elected officials have realized that if you keep certain people away from the ballot box, then those who are in power can do whatever they want. I mean, come on, think about it. Think about it. I am in Texas. Think about it for a moment. The district attorney, who's more concerned with the foolishness of Krista Mason's review on this issue of election fraud, and our current sheriff more concerned about being part of an election fraud unit. I'll put a semicolon here and tell you that Greg Abbott is still a Republican, right? Yeah. Is he not? Yeah. The governor of the state is the one who appoints what? The Secretary of State. Jane Nelson, a former Republican senator, is the Secretary of State. Following the 2020 election, after Donald Trump did his dog whistle of ensuring that areas where Joe Biden won, including Texas, Tarrant County, that he asked for what? A voter fraud investigation. The Republican Secretary of State concluded that there is zero evidence of voter fraud in Tarrant County. So why is our sheriff then more concerned with focusing on election fraud? Why is our sheriff more concerned? I better ask this question because I don't want to get in trouble. Anybody here is a teacher, an educator? If you are, just raise your hand for a second. All right, so no educators, so then I'm safe with what I'm about to say now. When I took geography, now I get it. I've been in Texas since 1990. I wasn't educated here other than for a master's and a doctorate. I did not get my formative education from here. But last I looked at a map in Texas, the border is about 400 miles away from here. And you're looking at someone who has had executive oversight of every inch of the southern border, from San Diego to Brownsville. And Tarrant County is nowhere near the border. So why is our sheriff more concerned with voter fraud? And why is our sheriff more concerned with border security? Our sheriff needs to be more involved and more concerned with ensuring that when people are placed in custody, that they have one or two or maybe three off-ramps, that violent offenders who are there get the kind of treatment that they need if they are placed there, and that they go to the court appointment, meet the next court appointment, and if by chance they have a bail, a bond, that they're able to go. If they're convicted, then they leave and go to the state or go home on community supervision. But here's the deal. Individuals, and in Tarrant County, we need to get better. Individuals who are suffering from mental health crisis, they have no business ever stepping foot inside of the Tarrant County Jail. Are you with me? Yeah. Mother, sister, let me, I'm seeing you for the first time. Let me be on behalf, I'm talking to Johnson. Let me say on behalf of all of us who are voters in Tarrant County. You have our condolences. I know you don't need that. But let us apologize for us doing the stuff that we do in Tarrant County. I just had to say that. It's a sad day in Tarrant County. It's sad for us to continue to traumatize people because our sheriff is a left-wing activist. Our sheriff is not concerned with the lives of people. No. Now, someone told me that if you are a conservative, you believe in the dignity of life. You believe in the person inside the mother's womb. But my question is, if you really are committed to the dignity of life, why would someone's child die in your custody? If you're really committed to the dignity of life, why would, and I tell you, Chastity had no business in Tarrant County Jail. The mother of Zenora, she had no business, none whatsoever. Why would Chastity, if you believe in the dignity of life, why would Chastity, who would not recognize labor pain, according to the medical profession, according to her mother, why would Chastity give birth to Zenora? And then the sheriff will make this statement, and I'm quoted now. I did not know it was in the cell. It is a pronoun, isn't it? If you're going to want to call Zenora by her gender, you should have said, I did not know she was in there. But he said, I did not know it was in there. There's an indication right there that you do not care. So we have a problem. I told you, started off with this question from W.B. Du Bois, how does it feel to be a problem? Let me tell you, when I got the call from Vance Keys, and Rhonda will tell you this, I have absolutely enjoyed being retired. When I checked out for the last time, I have thoroughly enjoyed spending all of my time running and chasing behind the people of First Missionary Baptist Church. I enjoy doing that. But you're looking at someone who believes that public service is a calling. It's not a job, it's a calling. And if deep down I believe that public service is a calling, then I had to answer the clarion call. I started off by telling you about a sociological question. But let me close based on a theological question and tell you what I'm proposing to do. In the text that I hold so close to me is the Christian text. There is in the Christian text one of some theologians call a minor prophet, the book of Michael. In the book of Michael, Michael is prosecuting the case, and it's Michael chapter 6, verse 8. And I'm saying this parenthetically, just in case if I miss a word. Michael raised this question, O mortal, what is good? And what does my Lord require of me? I told you I believe that public service is a calling. The writer says, but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with my God. I'm running for sheriff because I believe that there's a need for accountability. To release information on any use of force or any in custody death in the state of Texas, as long as the Attorney General is the unqualified Attorney General that he is today. I, as a sheriff, can simply say I'm waiting on an opinion from an Attorney General. Anybody who has been halfway not asleep in Texas since 1994 ought to know that as long as right-wing people are in positions of power, you'll never have access. But as sheriff, I believe in full accountability and full transparency. So here's what I want to do. When we focus back on justice, and we focus back on love, kindness, and we focus back on walking humbly with my God, since public service is a calling, I am going to create with the community what I consider a citizen oversight commission. The city of Fort Worth, following the death of Jacqueline, well, following the arrest of Jacqueline Craig, later died. The citizens asked for a citizen review commission. The city council changed hands, and what happened? Some right-wing people blocked the creation of a citizen review board. The national standard across anyone with common sense doing law enforcement recognize the fact that whenever there is independent oversight, that is someone outside of law enforcement, citizens who are engaged in every use of force and every in custody death. Let me say this. You know, I am a ordained minister. I have enough sense to know that some people will die in custody. I got enough sense to know that. As a preacher, I've gone to the graveside of newborn babies and of a 100-year-old person. So I understand the issue of life. You with me? Everybody with me? But I still believe that it does not matter how or when a person dies. When there are the properly educated women and men serving as detention officers and a partnership with local law enforcement and the creation of the real kind, you hear me, the real and authentic way of diverting the people with mental crisis away from incarceration and into the proper facilities so that they can get the right care that they need and return back to their homes. Because half of them suffer from mental health issues are really a low-level offender with a Class C misdemeanor that at most require a $50 bail. So a citizen oversight commission will compose of women and men across the county with perspectives that the medical examiner and others wouldn't have. Therefore, a family wouldn't have the right or be concerned, or I have to hide under this notion of litigation. That's the easiest thing to say, that I'm waiting for someone to give me some feedback. I don't have to wait for a medical examiner to know that this use of force is wrong. This in custody death is wrong. It doesn't take all of that. And so I want a citizen review, a citizen oversight commission. And you'll hear me say that interchangeably. Sometimes I say a citizen oversight, sometimes I say a civilian oversight, and I use that interchangeably, hinting that is outside of the purview of the people who are engaged in the rule of law. But then, within the first 100 days, and I've said this in November when I first announced that I was going to run after Vance called me, and can I tell you, when I first announced, I was 59 years old. On January 9th, when I turned 60 years old, the 60th person died. And then as I was running all over town trying to find my wife some flowers, the 61st person died on February 14th. And now we were at the 67th. It makes no sense to me. So I'm calling for a thorough, a robust review of every single policy. It does not matter to me if it's a policy focused on how you sweep a jail cell. A complete, a robust, a comprehensive review of every policy, every practice, and every procedure that's engaged in the Tarrant County Jail. And I want a robust conversation with the citizens to know and really a sense of transparency. So you'll know that this is a partnership, that this is indeed a partnership. I did not need I really didn't need KERA to tell me that the use of force policy in the current jail was last updated, 2009? Things have changed. Situations have changed. There's always emerging ways of doing things in the world. And so as your sheriff, I am going to call for a complete review of every policy. And I call that 100P3. I learned some years ago that you may not have the best information available to you, but there's a need to reach out to other experts. I learned that some time ago. And some people in the business world call it best practice or benchmarking. And in schools, if you don't give folk credit, they call it plagiarizing. And I just call it, but don't call the police. I just call it stealing people's ideas. In some of my research, I discovered that there are some better ways to do or to manage our detention, our jails. And there is a particular county that's equal in size to us. And the sheriff, in collaboration, hear that word, collaboration, in collaboration with mental health professionals, with those engaged with social work, faith and non-faith organizations, law enforcement, they've created what I'm calling a whole of community diversion concept, meaning, and it's really a cultural transformation. It's less about the training of a law enforcement officer, and it's more about educating a law enforcement officer. When I went to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, most of our training was on tactics. But when I encounter someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, if I am properly educated, I know not to escalate, but de-escalate, and then ensure that person gets to the right place to get the right kind of treatment so that that person can return to her or his family. So that's why I'm running. I'm closing on this and I open up for questions. I'm running because I believe that leadership matters. I'm running because I am a product of, again, a woman who could not vote when she gave birth to me. I'm running because I have been victimized by this notion of voter suppression. But I'm committed to all of us having access, all of us being able to go vote. Because when we vote, all the outcomes improve, including accountability and transparency in the jail. That's why I'm running. I'm not running, again, because I'm looking for some job. I'm not running because I'm looking to do that. I'm simply running so that we can have the right kind of accountability, the right kind of transparency in the Tarrant County Jail. And that we stop all the deaths in our jail. And we stop wasting taxpayers' dollars in warehousing people inside of the jail who have no business being there. That's why I'm running for sheriff of Tarrant County. No other reason. I'm gonna close with this and stop the questions. The role of a sheriff is threefold. And the question before us is how are we doing right now? The role of the sheriff is to provide some contractual and some rural law enforcement on unincorporated roads. The role of the sheriff is to provide courthouse security. But the most important role of the sheriff is to manage, the Constitution says to carry, to manage those who are in custody. The question before us, how are we doing right now? I would tell you that we are scoring a complete F. But I got some good news for you, and I'm gonna stop for questions. I got some good news. The late Dr. Martin Luther King says that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I'm running because I'm committed to justice. That's it. Qualified, prepared to do it, and doing my level best to draw a clear contrast to the activist judge, strike the activist sheriff that we have current serving since 2017. So that's why I'm running. Thank you so much. Open up for questions, and I'm good.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Got a question?
Yes, sir.
Knowing we've got an activist sheriff today, we've also got an activist county judge, right? And in these county level roles, there's partnerships, right? That you have to be able to function in that space. So what would your approach be to being able to partner and try and implement the changes you're looking to put in place, knowing we may have a county court that's a struggle to make those changes happen?
Well, hopefully, and that is an excellent question. I don't know if I brought enough copies to give to everyone, but what I want to share with you is that when we look at, Joshua, you might give me pass now something with the sheriff. When we look at our voting trends, and to me, I'll just be honest with you, voting matters. Access to the ballot box really, really matters. Access to the ballot box matters. We have the situation in Tarrant County right now because on election day, when it's time to go vote, instead of voting, we stay home. So look at these sheets that's in front of you. And I want to draw your attention to probably 3 or 4 of these House districts. The first is House District 90. Then I want you to look at House District 95, 92, House District 95, and then, of course, House District 101. In those districts, you notice that voted is under 41%. Do you see that? House District 101 is 40.74%. House District 90 is 35.02%. 95, 35.70%. Now, Miss 92 at 38.36%. Those are the House districts. Those are the House districts with majority minority voters. Are you with me?
Absolutely.
House District 90 is 66% Hispanic. And guess what? We're not voting. Just today, the activist Tarrant County Commissioner's Court attempted a coup to stop young people. Joshua was a student at UTA. Tried to suppress his vote under this crazy assumption, well, they don't vote anyway. And so legislators, including county commissioners, make decisions based on trying to keep people away from the voting box. Because by doing that, then they can get away with the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
House District 98, and I'm getting to your question. House District 98, House District 98, you see that? House District 98 is where Just today, I heard the county judge, and thank you, Sister Johnson, for checking him on every occasion. He made some crazy comments today, wondering, why should I have more, and I'm paraphrasing, why should I give this community more access to vote when we only got one in South Lake, we only got one in Keller? Have you recognized yet? That's where the affluent people live in Tarrant County, not on the south side of Fort Worth. Are you with me? But that's the foolishness that we deal with. And so when we realize that, as the Supreme Court said in 1967, that voting matters, and every act, this is an act of voting, not just going to the ballot box, but all of these conversations are important to voting. Registering people is important to voting. Educating people about why they should vote. In Shreveport, Louisiana, I'm from Natchez, Louisiana by birth. In Shreveport, Louisiana, the Democratic sheriff won by one vote in November. The conservative judiciary system decided to throw it out because it must be voter fraud. And I better tell you, voter fraud is straight back from the 19th century Jim Crow era, following Plessy versus Ferguson and the Reconstruction in America. That's all voter fraud is. Voter fraud has always been used as a tool to intimidate Black and brown and poor marginalized people from exercising the right to vote. But we got to register, we got to educate, but then we got to mobilize the people in these low voter turnout areas to say to them, if you want accountability, if you want justice, then you need to get people to the polls to vote so that we can get the people who we can hold accountable on election day. But if the voters of Tarrant County decide, one, I'm just making an assumption, to vote for me as sheriff, and then I have to deal with the person that's running against Roderick Miles, and I have to deal with the person running against Laura Lehman, and there's a complete conservative bench. In my role as a career executive with the Federal Protective Service, I had to deal with the likes of Ted Cruz. So I do bring some skill set of working with people who can care less about my outcome. It's about coalition building. It's about meeting them where they are and getting them to see that each one of us are precious in the very sight of our God. That's it. So it's about building those coalitions. But we got to get people to the polls.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any next question? Yes, ma'am. You have a what?
In settings like this, I have a small voice. One of the things that you mentioned was accountability. And that's in part one of my biggest questions is to what does that look like to you? Since April 21st, since I've had a one-on-one meeting with the sheriff that hasn't been televised, but that particular meeting is the meeting that's the reason why the sheriff ain't been to the commissioner's court every time I've been there. And in part of that meeting was I looked around his whole office and noticed that there was nobody of us. He even had his chaplain, which I, even to this day, sorry mistaking him for a medical examiner, but he was an African American chaplain. But brought him up there, first day at the job, brought him up there for us. Where everywhere around him was John Wayne, Rangers, sports. I've been up to Commissioner's Court, even up to 2 weeks ago, I went to his press conference. Showed up, only Black woman there. In a room, dining room full of truly KKK round. One thing I would say I respect for you, that when he seen me, him and the line, I'm pretty sure they're all law enforcement, just pointed at me, turned red. And one thing you are correct, his whole speech was about about 1776 and him wanting to go back as I was sitting in front. And I could tell what he wanted to say. He had to switch up that fast. I recorded. For me, what accountability is from the past is not working. And even on your website, even from the last day, I haven't seen my brother's information on the website. Haven't had a phone call from anybody. And when I mean I haven't gotten a phone call from anybody, not even from people who've been investigating to this day. I haven't gotten a phone call from Texas Rangers, nobody. Our family has been out and letting people know this is what's happening. So, with that, what is your ways of showing accountability? Because for me, we need people up at Commissioner's Court every 2 weeks. And as a husband, I totally respect that. My parents been married for 33 years, all my life. Just had a 33rd birthday. Don't know what having a single parent, don't know what not looking at a partnership. But my father would make time to go out and make things right. No matter for his wife, for me, and even my brother. Older age too, a little bit older than you. Don't look like it, but he has that energy because this is the change that needs to happen.
Right.
Because either after this, you do get this board. This, I am who you're going to be seeing.
That's right. That's right.
And what we need with voting, we need to push for that take.
Yeah.
Because everything that you mentioned in the jail cell, I hear what you're saying, but it's a culture
It is a culture. It is a
that
culture.
has to change.
Culture
And
transformation.
the thing is, with that culture, everybody is immersed. It wasn't just white men on my brother. Matter of fact, it was a black one that we're still going after that pepper sprayed my brother to death. It was Hispanics, unfortunately, that put the knee in my brother's neck. It was women calling over, slapping my brother on that tape when they're supposed to be nursing. It's not race, it's a whole culture. And it's a culture that I'm committed for the rest of my life to fight and to change. Wayborn knows it, O'Hare knows it. That's why he's scared every time I show up there. Because I don't care about what he and how he thinks we should receive. That's over with. That's the pressure. Now, one thing about God that I'm learning, life gonna move on. We don't know what God's mission is. Because the same God you're preaching is the same God that they say they believe in. But where was that at when they did that with my brother? The same God that they preach, the same God that you preach, where's the God that's going to tell people to stop treating people inhumane? That's the God that I'm looking for. That's the God that I'm trying to see who's pushing out for. And it seems to me that's the same message being spread across the way, but that the God that needs to be showing up, the God that needs to be showing at the front and making sure the rednecks actually show redneck, actually show color, actually show emotion, something that is not in their culture to do, but is in ours. A pain that I have to live with, I have to make them show that. So I'm asking you, how are you going to make them show that? Because that's that pain that they're running from, that they need to experience, that I'm tired of all of us experiencing.
Let me tell you, thank you so much. Those who have been with me, those who have been with me as recent as Tuesday night. Can I be transparent? Your very presence tonight messed with me. It really did. I'm being honest. My wife will tell you. Everywhere I go down the list. And I personally did not want, because I'm going to go to this Christianity thing in a minute. I personally did not want to do what I normally do when I'm not in your presence. Because I do call the name Anthony Johnson. And they can attest to that. But out of respect, I did not want to do that tonight. I was heading that direction, and I pulled out the paper with all the names, but out of respect, because we have not personally met. And people have asked me, so have you done this? And I say to people, I'm a pastor, that I announced I was running before your son, before your brother's death. And I am not one to patronize on somebody else. That's just not who I am as a person. That's just not, I'm not cut from that cloth. People have asked me, well, we don't see you. And I've taken that hit, and I said, fine, that's a good hit. I understand it. I am doing a clear contrast to the current activist sheriff. Because the moment I go there and focus on pounding the podium, and thank you for that prophetic voice, for pounding the podium, it'll be less about Anthony Johnson and more about Patrick Moses running for an office. And I refuse to do that. And you'll be surprised the number of people who have called and criticized and blasted me. And I said, fine, I'm running for sheriff of Tarrant County. The sheriff role is a leadership role. It's not an activist role. You got an activist now, and what do you have? You have people dying because he's not doing that. I want to speak something, and I'm going to get to the accountability. I want to speak about the difference in apparently the God that they're worshiping. Can I just be honest with you? I don't know that God. I'm going to be honest with you. I do not know the God that these folk who are hanging themselves under this Christian nationalism. I don't know that God. That's not the God I know. That's not the God that brought my grandma, who was born in 1892, couldn't read and write, picked cotton on a Melrose plantation all her life. That's not the God I know. That is simply not the God I know, but for the God I know says, one, we're all created in the image of God. The God I know, when I get over to Luke, tells me about the Spirit of the Lord and talks about breaking down this oppression. The God I know over in Matthew 25 tells me about visiting the sick and caring for folk. So the God that they are preaching is really not the God that created us. They are simply preaching and advocating in their congregations. Can I just be honest? A political agenda to keep oppressed people down and to ensure, as long as Greg Abbott is the governor and what's the Attorney General, Ken Paxton is Attorney General, they can hide around all of that white supremacy I just said. That's simply what it is to keep us in a place of captivity. So in my vision of accountability, that there is no way in the world that you should have had to go to the newspaper or ask anybody about what happened, how it happened, and when it happened. My vision is that the Citizen Oversight Commission would have given you that information before you asked. And guess what? If you sue us, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I need to be sued. Are you with me? I mean, if that's why you got civil torts. I mean, if I do something to afflict harm on you, and we got the current, and Sister Johnson so right, it's a culture issue. It is a culture issue. It's a culture issue, and it starts from day one. How do you recruit people into these positions? And once you recruit them into the position, how do you then have them properly educated? I'm about to embarrass my son. When he was in law school, he and I were having this debate about educating and recruiting police officers right after the George Floyd death. And I told Terrence that a police department, policing in America need to make a transformation, because we're so focused on law and order and less focused on the rule of law. Law and order, may I use your son's name? Okay, I got permission. Law and order says get Anthony Johnson and don't care about his issue or his parents or his siblings or his nephew. Don't worry about that. He's violating the law, throw him in the jail and ignore him. Rule of law says this person is having an experience. This educated law enforcement officer should have engaged him and should have known exactly what the next step and call mother, call sister, call dad, and call other loved ones here where he is in this facility and not in custody. You know who he is. And if you're concerned about some Class C misdemeanor, you got all of his information. Send a ticket and send it to the house because he should not have died. I'm just being honest. He shouldn't have died. And so accountability, my sense of accountability is not just giving you information, but it's on the start end. We got to learn to prevent stuff instead of trying to correct. Just prevent it. Make sure that the detention officer, make sure the police officer, make sure everyone is properly educated. Proactive, that's it. To engage, and policing ought to be proactive. I want to tell you all this story. During the George Floyd, I call it the summer of justice, reacting to Donald Trump sending helicopters and Black Hawks over our children marching in the street. I was downtown Fort Worth, Texas. That's where my office was. And all of our law enforcement folk were on the street. And this particular day, I guess I had some calls to make, and I was kind of dressed up. And so I decided to go downstairs because I wanted to see the young people protesting law enforcement on how we treat Black and brown people. I really wanted to see. And more importantly, I wanted to see how people who reported to me interact with our children who are marching down the street. One of the officers saw me when I walked out of the building, and I just had a suit on, tie, whatever, and he walked over to me. And this young officer said to me, "Mr. Moses, do you see all these children, these young people?" I said, "Yes." And he said to me, you know, this is not about George Floyd. I said, "Well, what is it about?" He said, "It's about Antifa." So, some of you who just met me for the first time don't know that my wife will tell you my sense of humor is kind of warped at times. And I turned to this young man who did not know that he was already, can I be honest, on my rate. I'm retired now, so there's nothing new to me. Well, maybe they might cut my pension off, so I might find a job. He didn't know that one of his officers had reported him for having a Confederate flag on him. He didn't know that, but I did. And his co-worker blew the whistle on the Confederate flag. Not so much that he had a Confederate flag. He was concerned, how does this officer engage with, let's say, a Michael Brown? How does this officer, let's say, engage with a Tatiana Jefferson? How does this officer engage with, let's say, a Robert Miller? Okay. Let's say a Zenora. Let's say a Javante, Anthony Johnson. That's what this officer was concerned about. And of course, I had to do some corrective issues with this. But my Baptist preacher got in the way of it on that day. I blurred a line. And I simply said this to this young man. I said, "Let me tell you something. Those young people, Black, brown, and guess what? Some white children at some age, they were all out there marching. No justice, no peace. And here's what I told him. You and all of this conservative foolishness think that these children know something about Antifa. I said, if you were to pull any one of those children out of that parade, that marching, and all of them, my brother, would tell you, Antifa, told you I had a warped sense of humor. Antifa, I do not know, but Antifa, I do. Who in the world is Antifa? That's a thought. That's not an organization. Thank you. And so accountability is a reimagining of how we get out of this foolishness of law and order and engage law enforcement from a rule of law perspective and ensure that every single person is properly educated, properly developed, so that we are retaining those individuals who are engaging. Our children ought not be afraid of law enforcement. I still remember when I was a 4-year-old boy and a police officer just stopped in my house to talk to my grandmother and just trying to be friendly. But I saw that police officer still traumatized, and I'm 60 now. I ran around the house the whole time he was there because I was afraid. Some of us are afraid of law enforcement, and we need to de-escalate all of that drama in this area. You know why? Simply because that person has taken an oath to protect and serve you. And if I murder you in a jail, the state is sanctioning that kind of foolishness. And we need to stop that. And how do we stop it? Get people to the ballot box. That's how we stop it. That's how we really get accountability. You elect the right people and you hold those people accountable to do exactly what you want to do. So by opening it up to the community and engaging us and having these kind of conversations as a sheriff, hide for what? What am I hiding for? Being transparent. If there was a mistake made, here's the mistake, own it and correct it. Right. And make sure it never occurs again. That's simple. That's on every use of force. That's on every in-custody death. See, I believe from an accountability perspective, if your child, and I just saw, I think KERA, Star Telegram, one of them earlier today, earlier today, that Tarrant County Jail has a new use of force policy. About pepper spray. What are you talking about? That's old school. I mean, that's last year's news. I'm sorry, that's 2020 news. It's 2024, isn't it? We're almost about to get to 2025, and we're still talking about stuff we should have handled some years back. So I think that there ought to be a new image of accountability and holding your elected officials accountable and elected officials. Well, I'm going to say this one more time, being redundant. I'm like a scratch 45 for those of you from the 70s, and you understand where I'm going. We got to unelect people who are not focused on democracy. Right. Bottom line. Right. You can have different political perspectives, but you got to get the right people who are invested in you and less invested in themselves. So that's what I'm doing. Any other questions? You all know I talk all night, so my wife tells me all the time, "You shut up." So if you ask another question, she'll have a good evening, because then I don't have to go home and talk all night. Because I will do. Somebody please ask another question. Yes, Tatum. Anybody know? Anybody got another question?
My only question is, how do we get our young people? We got thousands of young people that's not even concerned about voting. You could be sheriff tomorrow if they voted.
Let me tell you, another criticism I take, and I am a man of my word. I believe in just being honest with you. One is, I haven't been visible. I haven't been going to the county commissioner's court trying to take somebody else's pain and make it mine when it's not my pain. Are you with me? Yeah. We've had death in our family. We get that. And some horrific moments as well. Not to that level, though. And the way we, in my mind, one of the mistakes now, if we're on Facebook Live, you might want to tell all my Baptist friends turn their tubes off right now. But one of the things, the major mistake I think we make as we get into election seasons, politicians on my side of the aisle tend to make the same mistake that we make in the church. And I'm talking about the church where I pastor. I'm not talking about your church or any other church. Since COVID, I can stand up in the pulpit and look out in the audience and tell you everybody in the room. All right? And yet we still do the call to discipleship. And I already know that person's saved. All right? But I never go across the street to the apartment complex and try to meet their needs. You follow? I never go under the bridge and see somebody experiencing housing insecurity and see how can we help them move, how can they get out of poverty. You follow me? Sunday after Sunday, I'm preaching to the choir because we are so theoretically, and I'm gonna tell you what the late just died at 95, James Morris Lawson said, United Methodist preacher who was Martin Luther King's civil rights nonviolence teacher, said we're so focused on soul salvation and less focused on social salvation, and that's what our problem. And on the political side, we got the same issue. I get blasted now because we don't see you at this meeting. We don't see you at this meeting. It's the same people under different umbrellas, but we're not reaching out to other people. So you see, I have two young people with me tonight, and both of them have very prominent roles in this campaign. Because in order for us to reach the young people, we have to ensure that they can bring something to the table. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And I think that's the only formula for success is that we reach out to college age students and teach them the importance of voting, why they vote,
Yeah.
and not only why they vote. You know, this person that is running for this particular office, how does this impact you? Now, if you got healthcare, I'm just using this as an example. If you got healthcare and you're only concerned about your healthcare and you're not concerned about the person next door, that's a self-centered person.
Yeah.
And we got to learn to be more concerned about people who do not have what we have. I was talking to a young person today, and I told him in my prior life, when I would interview people at the supervisor, the managerial, and the leadership role, I told him that in the last interview, regardless of what position that person was applying for, they had to come to this conference room where I was. And I brought all the other leaders in the room, and I called it my assessment center. My headquarters got upset with me for doing it, but guess what? I did it every time. And I'm glad about it because now one of the young ladies who went through it in 2009, she now has the job I had back in Washington, D.C. when I left there in 2011. But I asked these people two questions. Well, one question, what kind of leader are you? It's two parts. What kind of leader are you? Are you a leader who focuses on your resume? Or are you a leader who focuses on your obituary? A person who focuses on their resume is one who's simply concerned with themselves. What's the next job I'm getting? You know, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And never pay attention to other people. But that leader who's focused on his or her obituary is other-centered. Because when you get to the end of your watch, somebody ought to say, because of what you did, you know, the difference that you made in this person's life. And so those are, that's the kind of stuff that motivate me. That's the kind of stuff that drive me. And that's why, in my view, it's important to reach out to young people to get them inspired, encouraged, and really mobilized. Can I get an ask of all of you, if you don't mind?
Yes.
If you're concerned for real with justice, if you're really concerned with democracy, here's my ask. We have until October 7th. I understand from the election administrator, since the midterm, we have registered 50,000 new voters in Tarrant County. And I think that's important. I think that's important. So we registered the voters. But then we have to educate people. Tell the young people that there are resources out there so that they can do their homework. And I'm going to recommend one, the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters expose all information about voters. An informed person, an educated person is a person who can make a difference. But then we can't just stop with education. We got to mobilize. We got to go out and mobilize. That means we got to get on the phone. And I like how I like two things that former First Lady Sheila church. Former First Lady, the founding First Lady is at our church still, and I talk about her every Sunday. Founding First Lady Sheila sings. Mayor, don't tell her I said that, all right? But we have to take on this word of former First Lady Michelle Obama, and she said two things that stood out to me. One, stop eating your own. Hold us accountable, but stop tearing down each other. Yeah. Because we all got to, if you're concerned with justice, you know, my sense of what you consider justice may not align with yours. But we got to find some solidarity and fight for justice. Are you with me? And then she said something else. She said, you got to do something. So I'm running really to do something. I'm really running to do something. That's all. Again, I have enjoyed my retirement. Now Rhonda will be upset because I have to go. I cannot, every time she sends me a text and I got to go run do this. I got to go run do that. I'm trying to do something, all right? Yeah. So my final ask for you, and I promise you, I'll leave you alone. My oldest granddaughter said, whenever he said, I'm gonna leave you alone, I got to go on Sunday morning when he's preaching, that means he's about to preach another 30 minutes. Yeah. But I thank God she's away in college, and so she won't hear this coming. But my final ask of all of you is for you to do something. I identify 7 people that you know. Now, I ought to ask for your money, but I'm not gonna do that tonight. I'll let Josh ask for that. I'm gonna ask for your vote. But if you want to ensure that another person, not another human, not another person created in the image of God, died because of right-wing ideology in the Tarrant County Jail, I need you to do something. And you know what I need you to do? You're all too quiet for me tonight. You know what I need you to do?
What?
You think? You know what I need you to do? I need you to go tell Lottie, go tell Dottie, and go tell everybody that it's time for us to bring justice to Tarrant County. Again, I'm Patrick Moses. I want to serve as your sheriff, not because I want a job, but because I am committed to justice. I'm committed to doing something. I'm sorry, man.
All right.
I have a question. And part of your first statement, you mentioned how Wayborn is actually a manager, correct?
Yes.
And so then you're actually a leader.
Right.
For those who don't understand the definition of the difference of both, because most people think they're a leader when they're actually managers, and some people think they're managers when they're actually leaders.
Yeah.
And so when you become the leader of the managers, and the managers will be the people that are up under you in the cells, how would you coordinate something to actually check with them for those who might be dealing with something that causes them to respond to the inmates the way that the current leadership, the current management has been? How will you go in and check their mentality or their mental issues? Create something that we can actually find out if they're dealing with something that's causing them to respond and react to the inmates because they can't take it out on their spouses or their children or whatever they're dealing with, they take it out on the inmates. How will you set up something that will prepare and or retrain, given the knowledge and the skills of what a real bailiff or that person in charge is supposed to do when they're dealing with inmates that they're only temporary or later permanent in a different location, but temporary at that location?
I would call Tim out by name, not Tim O'Hare, another Tim, who used to work for me. I implemented when I left Washington in 2011. I commuted. I stayed here, but I commuted backwards and forwards when I served as regional director in Washington,
You got
D.C.
a lot of flyer miles, don't you?
Oh, I did. But somebody blew them up. So they all gone. Don't tell I talk about it, right? But leadership, and I borrowed a guru's definition of leadership, a gentleman named John Maxwell. And John Maxwell defined leadership with one word, and that is influence.
Correct.
One word, that the leader set the example. But then there is and I have at my house a little artifact. It's an African artifact, and it's a person holding a hand, and it's an egg on the inside, saying that leadership is just that fragile. And so there is a need again for culture transformation among the leadership rank. I am recruiting leaders to join me to serve the people of Tarrant County. Don't need managers. I need some leaders. And so I have extensive leadership background. Been trained, been educated, been tried and tested, have been served as the incident commander for the largest presidential election since we got a president who wants a person who want to run for president, a convicted felon who wants to be president. Talk about crowd sizes. The largest inauguration in our nation. Pardon me?
I was saying, he said billions.
Billions and billions. And that capacity. And as an incident commander of his inauguration for the Federal Protective Service asset and the Southern Border and my day-to-day work. But I discovered something that as the leader, I may not know every single thing that's going on in operation, but I am accountable for everything that goes on in the organization. It doesn't matter if it's what a detention officer did, I am the one that's accountable for it. That's leadership.
It is.
And so since you're holding me accountable, I need to know what is going on. I do not need you, Daddy, to call me, tell me what happened to your kinfolk in the jail. Or for me to call. I need to know what's going on. So here's what I did. And at one point, I had leaders reporting to me from Seattle, Washington, from San Francisco, from Boston, from New York, Atlanta, Chicago, all different time zones. And so I got a certain time frame. And every day I had what was called a daily stand-up. And these folk had to give me a briefing on every single thing that happened in the organization. So I knew what was going on in Atlanta. I knew what was going on in Kansas City. I knew what you were going to do today, what happened on yesterday. Oh, and by the way, what's going to happen. And then every week we will have what I consider a staff conversation. And then I would have a quarterly performance meeting. So I knew on a quarterly basis what's going on, what we are projecting next quarter, what we did this past quarter. Just have that situational awareness. And in order for me to interact, to know what's going on, it takes that feedback. Let me close on this one. My agency was responsible for doing what they consider facility security assessments for organizations, for other federal agencies. And we had a project in one of the locations in Washington, really it was in Maryland. And the union got upset with me because I wanted all of the, we call them inspectors, to come give me a brief on all of their projects. And the union said, well, sir, they can't do that. I said, well, tell all their supervisors to come in and give me a brief. So I want to know from every perspective. I want to know the intelligence report. I want to know the financial impact. I want to know what countermeasure you're going to install in this Internal Revenue Service location. And folk wanted to give me pushback, and I insisted. But then I had to go to a meeting. And that director of that agency, that IRS office, started talking about a wall that they were trying to build. But because of the National Preservation Commission, the wall had to be like 6 feet and they wanted 8. But because I had this information flow, when I went to that meeting as the leader to a leader, I was not blindsided. So leaders influence. It's about influence and sharing of information and knowing what's going on. So that's simple to me. It's just that simple. And since leadership is about setting an example, that's something that I would drive down the organization. So the person who's in charge of detention ought to have that same kind of engagement. And you know how I know he'll have that engagement? Because folk who work for me will tell you, Patrick Moses, the nosest person I ever met, because I walk around on the floor and get to know you. Know every single thing that you're doing. Why? Because I think if I value you enough, I ought to know what you're doing on this particular station. Can you imagine if that kind of environment was occurring since 2017? The 67 people, we would subtract out all of those deaths and only those who died of natural death. It's simple to me. It is that simple to me. It is just that simple. Leadership matters.
Absolutely.
And the role of a sheriff is a leadership position. And I hope nobody walk away from here surprised about why we have the problem we have. Because we in Tarrant County, because we fail to vote, we do not call people and tell them to vote. We elected someone who at most has been responsible for one of the smallest police departments in all of Tarrant County. That's who you elected as your sheriff. That is it. That's it. He's never had any leadership posts other than responsible for 2 to 5 people in the small police department near Arlington, Dogworth and Garden. That's it. That's it. And so why are you surprised when he can't have an accountability conversation? Because he's never been forced to have one. He's never been taught. He doesn't have that experience. I'm gonna leave you with this crazy example. And then you can say, where do you come with these crazy ideas from? You are a parent. Imagine you are a parent.
I am.
And all right, so you're a parent. And you have to go on a little trip somewhere. And you have 2 children. So help me with my example. You have 4 children. You have 4 children, and they're all under, let's say, 16. 16, the youngest is 4, right? Let's just say this. This is just my crazy example. And you leave, and on your way out the door, you tell the 4-year-old, you are in charge. Are you following it? You leave the 4-year-old in charge, and then you come back to the house and you expect everything to be decent and in order. That's the condition of Tarrant County. We elected someone who was totally incompetent, and now we're acting like we're surprised. That's what the problem is. That's what the problem is. That's what the problem. And I'm running not because I'm an activist. I'm running because I am qualified on day one. I have managed budgets up to $500 million. As a matter of fact, that's even my day-to-day operation. But at the national level, I was responsible for our entire $1 billion Protected Security Officer program. I understand managing. That's management. Beans and bullets, that's management. But leadership is about influencing and inspiring the people to do the right thing every single day of the week. That's it. And that's about the culture. That's why I'm running. That's it. That's all I got.
All right.
You can close that.
You want to talk about that?
Close that.
Okay. Well, I want to tell everybody thank you for coming. Now we know who our next sheriff will be. Oh, I thought we were off. I want to thank all of you all for coming. tonight so you all can see the real Patrick Moses, our next sheriff for Tarrant County. And I also want to piggyback off of the voting part. We have deputy registers back here and also our ex-mayor back there. And we also have right off the press, we have the new door knockers papers right now, hangers, that we will be starting tomorrow, hitting these neighborhoods tomorrow up until November the 2nd. This is our neighborhood. We are House District 95. I am the House District Coordinator all the way north to Highway 10, all the way south to 1187. This is all of our area, and we have a lot of House District 95s in here. So we need to be getting it out. We have the door hangers. You all need to be getting with your precinct chairs. And we got Miss Forrest Hill over here to pick up all of hers too tonight. They're in my truck.
All right.
Thank y'all. Go vote. Get your people to go to the polls.
Thank you.